Apart from being critically acclaimed, one of the most memorable things about Hades is its striking visuals. It's gritty, it's stylish, and it's instantly recognizable. This episode was requested by Choco Drops. I ran a poll on the community tab to see which episode you wanted me to prioritize next, and Hades was the winner. Hey everybody, my name is Thomas, and welcome back to another episode of Render Breakdown, a show where we study popular video game artworks, break down its art style, then try our best to replicate it in the end. So, I think that's enough yapping for now, and let's just get right into it. In an interview led by MCV Develop, art director of Supergiant Games Gen Z states, quote, "A through line of the influences that I love to draw from are that they're often traditional or rooted in classical art. On our previous game, Pyre, I'd gotten really into some pen and ink artists. The inky influence I'd wanted to incorporate into Pyre was resurrected in Hades. At the inception of the project, we thought that the art style would be painterly. We ended up pivoting to pen and ink when the narrative and tone changed drastically during pre-production." End quote. This explains a lot of what we see in the art style, the deep black shadows reminiscent of comic books like Hellboy. In the same interview, Mike Mignola is stated as a direct inspiration, and you can definitely see this in the final Hades renders, especially when compared to Mignola's works. You might be wondering why I bother seeking out interviews of artists for these videos. Even if the art style seems pretty straightforward, I do think it's important to hear from the artist's perspective. It informs us of why they do things a certain way and contextualizes their stylistic decisions. In our case, now we know that the art style is supposed to be emulating pen and ink. Sure, you might be able to tell this from a glance, but I do think it's still important to hear from the artist directly. Besides, for me, half the fun is learning about the stories of the people behind the artworks that I love. In an internet that's rapidly being filled with generative AI, I do think it's nice to put a name behind the people who make games. With that out of the way, let's get our magnifying glasses ready and try to pick apart the artworks themselves. And what better character to start with other than Zagreus? Alright, let's zoom in a little bit. There we go. And here are my observations. Firstly, the most obvious thing. It's got pure black shadows that evoke the pen and ink comic book aesthetic. The line art isn't very clean, a lot of broken lines here and there, and sometimes there are even variations with the stroke width. Look at Zaggy's hands over here. There's some very subtle hatching used to define some details. If you're unfamiliar with the term, hatching is a technique used to define shadows by way of drawing lines parallel to each other. The closer they are together, the darker the shadow, and vice versa. If you're an American, a good example I can give you is if you pull out your money. The $1 bill has George Washington's portrait, and you can see, if you zoom in a little bit, that it's defined using hatching techniques. Another thing I've noticed is that there's typically a bright color along the shadow's edge that sort of transitions the base color from the core shadow color. This edge is also known as the Terminator line. There are also some high contrast highlights that reflect on the character, presumably from the environment around him. Look at these bright yellows and oranges. Along with that, there seems to be some random specks of vivid colors scattered on the artwork. This detail, while very subtle, does add to the unique quality of Hades' portraits. I'm going to assume these flecks of colors are supposed to correspond to the boon colors in the game, but I'm not entirely sure. Either way, it's a detail to keep in mind. The color palette is high contrast. The character portraits typically have one rich accent color that the rest of the color palette kind of skirts around and pales in comparison to. In Zagreus' case, it's red contrasted with his pale, almost gray skin. For Dionysus, it's purple contrasted with his dark but still desaturated skin. Artemis is green, Demeter is blue, and so on. The overall shape language is sharp and stylized, almost Fortnite-like. You can see this clearly with the way Megaera's whip is drawn, or in Athena's braids, Alecto's hair, Artemis's fur. This isn't to say that smooth edges can't exist within the art style. There are certainly characters that have smoother features like Zeus's beard coalescing into a cloud formation, or Poseidon's hair flowing like water, even Aphrodite's locks curling into hearts. But even then, you can still see the sharpness in, for example, Poseidon's pointy muscles. I think ultimately you should decide whether or not this makes sense for the material of the object or for the character in general. Lastly, there is an aspect of abstract simplicity. I'll expand more on this later when we're actually making the artworks, so just put a pin on this for now. With all that said, Here's a simplified version of everything I just said in a convenient list form. I know YouTube loves its lists. If we were to make a material sphere with the characteristics of all the things I've listed, it should look something a bit like this. With our light source coming from the top right, you can see the pure black shadows here, the Terminator line color over here, some subtle hatching details, flecks of random colors. You can even see my attempt at the Hades shape language by making the ball imperfect. In the same interview with MCV Develop, Gen Z says that the 2D assets were made in Photoshop. Luckily, we're not going to be animating anything or making any 3D models, so we're just going to be using a similar art program. My program of choice is Clip Studio Paint, or CSP for short, but you can 100% use any other standard art program for this. I ran a poll on my Twitter page to see who your favorite mythology-inspired video game character is. I only got 15 votes, so you should probably follow me on there so I don't look like a total loser. Anyways, Palutena is the winner. Hooray! But I wanted to do some warm-ups before going for it. So I decided to go for the second best pick as my practice character. Kratos from God of War Ragnarok. I started with a rough sketch. I tried to match Zagreus' proportions in relation to head size versus body size, with some leeway because obviously Kratos is a lot beefier. Whenever I make artworks for a render breakdown, I never want to copy an existing render's pose one-to-one. I decided that having him rest his axe on his shoulders would be a cool, nifty look for him. Alright, line art. Pretty straightforward. With a canvas size of about 1500 by 2100, I used a standard hard round brush with a size of 3 pixels to do most of it. For some areas, I would fluctuate to using 4 pixels whenever I really wanted to emphasize it. I make sure to break my lines every now and then to give off that imperfect pen and ink feel. Now we're moving on to some color blocking. You could do this in one layer for sure, but I don't know, I felt a little quirky that day and decided that I'm going to make a different layer per color because why not? Now we're doing the pure black shadows. I decided that the light source would be coming from the top left, and so I made the shadows in accordance to that. For the shading, we are going to be using layer blending modes. If you're unfamiliar with this, layer blending modes decides how a layer is going to interact with the others below it. By default, all layers are set to normal. This means that the layer on top will cover the pixels below it. All the other settings will make your layers see-through with different effects. You should play around with them to see what they do, but for this artwork specifically, we'll just be using multiply. I set the layer's opacity to about 70%. Starting with the face, I decided that I wanted the skin to have a bluish tint for the shadow. In contrast, I chose a bright orange color for the Terminator line. My reasoning for this is that they contrast great against each other as they are opposite colors. You might not want them to contrast like that all the time, so choosing colors is up to your discretion, just make sure it makes sense for your work. I also have a third shading color here that's much lighter and acts as a sort of global luminescence or subtle highlight. One of the things that I want to point out with my translation to the Hades style is the fur coat. Compared to the official God of War Ragnarok artwork, my rendition is very sharp and stylized. I reference this off of the way Artemis's own fur coat is drawn in Hades. It's a good idea to compare similar items between both art styles, especially when you're translating one art style to another. It's also a good reference for how coloring is handled as well. And before I knew it, I'm doing finishing touches such as the highlights and color flecks. A subtle thing these portraits have are a soft gradient. There's usually a color coming from the bottom that fades as it goes up, so we're going to add that. Finishing this all off with an outline on the entire artwork. The Hades portrait seemed to be outlined with a stroke, so I did the same thing here. And it's done! I'm really proud of how this turned out, especially for my first try, and it makes me, confident with tackling other characters in the same art style. So, we're going to be circling back to Palutena. I like to involve you guys in my videos somehow, and that's why I love doing a lot of polls. I couldn't decide on a post for her, so I decided to run it by you guys over on YouTube, and option 2 won by landslide. Great, so I got to work. Honestly, I initially had some trouble with trying to translate her into Hades, mostly because of her face. I don't know what it is about it, but it was hard trying to find the balance between her very anime looking face and the more detailed proportions of Hades. I wasn't really happy with the initial sketch I made, so I had to start over a couple times. And that's a hot tip for you. If something isn't quite working out, or you feel like you're stuck somewhere, well, it might be good to abide by this principle sometimes. Kill your babies. Start fresh. It's alright. Don't be afraid to start over. It's never too late, in art or otherwise. Because after I did that, well, I eventually ended up with a sketch I'm much more satisfied with. One of the bigger challenges I faced in drawing Palutena is drawing all of her accessories. There's just so much of it! Luckily, one of the characteristics of the Hades art style is its abstract simplicity. This is what I was talking about earlier. Things that would typically require a lot of detail are simplified into something more abstract. You can see this with Artemis and her horns, or this chain necklace on Karen. You see how they're drawn as broken lines instead of being detailed? It's like they're melting into each other. Here are other official Hades artworks that employ this technique. This makes it really easy for us to draw the details of Palutena's accessories by simply retaining their basic silhouette. Just pretend they're sort of melted a little bit. I don't have much else to say here that I haven't already with Kratos, so I'm just going to let the rest of this speed paint play out. Add some finishing touches, and this is what we ended up with. As always, I'm happy with how this turned out, and I'm glad to have another art style added to the render breakdown arsenal. I changed my shirt. It's a different day, don't worry about it. As per tradition with this channel, I like to post my artworks on social media beforehand to, gauge what people think about them. Maybe see if I did a good job or a bad job. So I posted this on Reddit, and well, it didn't do crazy numbers, but hey, 800 upvotes. That's gotta count for something, right? I'm glad to at least be able to fool one person. Sucker. Just kidding. I have a semi-important announcement to make. I've opened up a Patreon. One of my tiers gives you access to all the project files from all the render breakdowns so far. This means PSDs, clip files, and more. I've included the 7-day free trial so you can check it out for yourself, and technically this means you can hop in and out and grab the files if you really wanted to, but of course, I'd prefer you stick around. Well, either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think I did a good job, or do you think I didn't? And if so, how do you think I should improve? Alternatively, if you think I did a really bad job and you feel the need to leave a mean comment down below and fight everybody in their place maybe, well, that's not ideal, but you're very welcome to do so. I love comments. I eat them for breakfast. Sorry, what the fuck was that? If you'd like to support this channel without spending any money, then I trust you already know what to do. Liking, commenting, subscribing, all that shit. So, what video game art style do you want to see me do next? I already do have a video lined up for October and December. They're pretty special episodes, so I hope you look forward to them. I'm really excited for them to materialize. And yeah,